I'm joined today with General Gordon Sullivan, who is the 32nd Chief of Staff of the Army of the United States, the top job in the Army. And General Sullivan is one of the generals we're honoring with the General's Bridge and General's Park. Welcome, General.
Nice to be back, Mr. Mayor. I'm very fond of Quincy, and it's nice to be back. I spent my first 21 years on this earth right here in Quincy. It always bothers me that they list my place of birth as Boston, but my mother brought me back here from the hospital to lying in. So something I never understood what lying in meant until I became an adult.
Sure.
Anyway, we lived up on Faxon Hill. That was my first.
We were just chatting before we went on the air here. Behind you is Bethany Congregational Church.
Right.
And you tell me your parents were baptized on the same day in that church.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And for reasons known only to the two of them.
Now, were you living in the Faxon Park at that time, or were you
No.
Lake Square?
No, we were in Lincoln Square.
Lake Square, okay.
Yeah.
Old West Quincyeites know what Lake Square means.
That's right.
Essentially over by Adams Street and
Yeah.
Beale Street. What's some of your earliest memories of Quincy, General?
The first thing I remember is my mother taking me to the Abigail Adams Carn and telling me that she was there with her children when Bunker Hill was burning,
That's right.
Charleston. And then we went down to the houses, which I don't remember going in them, but
Right.
I'm not even sure they were open then. I went to Central Junior High School, and if I walked to school, which I did sometimes.
I thought everybody walked to school in those days.
Well,
I thought it was uphill both ways.
Yeah, I mean, it was, that's what it was.
Sure.
But I never went into the Adams Mansion
Okay.
until Laurie and I went down one winter day and it was closed. I said, I've never been in this place, and I lived here.
That's a lot of Quincy people say the same.
Yeah.
We go by it every day, and yeah. So you went to Central Middle School, and then on to Quincy High.
Yes, and we were talking about that. I flunked algebra, and I went home with my report card, and sort of to soften up a little bit, I said, Ma, I think I'll apply down at the shipyard to be an apprentice. And she said, say that again. It was one of those things like, she had her head over here. She thought I was going to come up with some. And she said, I've got something else planned for you. You're going to Thayer for summer camp, or for summer school. And if you pass, you'll stay there. So I started here and
Yeah.
finished there.
Okay. Did you play football or
I
anything?
played football there. I actually played football here for a guy named Marty Finnegan, who
Sure.
was you probably may know him.
I remember Marty, sure.
But he passed away.
Maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did play for them.
What position did you play?
I was a tackle.
Yeah.
And
And you licked algebra. No more trouble with algebra?
but then at Norwich, I became a government major, and the math was not.
Was Norwich a easy selection out of there, or did you think about that?
I had a couple of buddies who were there that I played football with. And they said, come on up on the weekends, you know, we're in a fraternity and we got, you know, football game and it'll be great, show you around and so forth. He said, what do you say we go up and see Tiny and watch the football game and spend the weekend at Norwich and see what they have to offer? So he said, should we come here? Should we apply? I said, yeah, I think so. I like the guys. And anyway, I enrolled in 55, and because my mother and father were divorced, I had a scholarship, worked in the kitchen, and did other things like sell sandwiches at night and made a couple of bucks for walking around money. I was a history major and a government major.
Were you thinking about the military at that point?
Everybody had to take ROTC anyway. It was the cadet life cadet life was like, really? You know, make your bed so that the quarter bounces off the, you know. I said, wait a minute, there's got to be more to it than this. I went to summer camp at Fort Knox in the summer of 58 and fell in love with the Army. And if I had to do it over again, I would.
Did you, but at that point, you knew you were going to make a career of it, or you just wanted to serve?
I wanted to get my commission,
Okay.
and I wanted to serve. And as soon as I figured that out, I want to be a real soldier. And I did become a real soldier.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
What's your first memory of, real memory in the service of a special moment, if you will?
Well, the first special moment was when I became a regular Army officer.
Okay.
I then received orders to go to Korea, and I spent 14 months in a tank battalion up on the militarized zone. While I was there, the Chief of Staff of the Army asked for volunteers to go to Vietnam. And that was in 62.
Okay. That was early.
Yeah, I was one of the first guys to go. Well, the guy I was supposed to, there was a group of 13 that was the first ones in, and then my cohort went and replaced them. But the gent I was supposed to replace got blown off the top of a armored vehicle. And they had to replace him. So when I got there, I wound up as an infantry advisor and learned why in war you can get killed.
Bad things can happen.
Bad things can happen.
Yeah.
Luckily, I survived, and I stayed there for 18 months. I was doing some intelligence stuff, and came out of there, and then went to back to Knox to school, and then went to Germany for the first of 4 tours in Germany.
Did you ever dream you would become Chief of Staff of the Army?
No,
Yeah.
no, I did not. I did not.
Let me ask you while you're on that. So you've been to Germany a few times. So this is post-World War II. I mean, the kids today, you got to explain to them what World War II is all about, but it's
Right.
fairly fresh in people's minds. How were the Europeans, how were the Germans to the Americans over there, to the soldier?
Everything was fine as long as they acted
Yeah,
appropriately.
sure.
In those days, there were 4 marks to the dollar. I mean, I spent 36 years in the Army, and half of them were overseas.
Wow.
Two in Vietnam, 1 in Korea, and 4 in Europe.
Well, I remember when I called Joe McConville a couple of years ago, and I said, Joe, I need to get a hold of your son. I told him the idea we're going to be honoring some Quincy generals. Before I could even get that statement finished out of my mouth, he said, I hope you're including Gordon Sullivan. And I said, yes, we are, Joe. He said, he rebuilt the Army. He's responsible for really pulling us back together in the Army. It was in some disarray at the time, he said.
Right.
In fact, if I might, you're also an author, and I just want to read something that Colin Powell said. Gordon Sullivan is one of the Army's most visionary leaders. His insights into leadership and human behavior are truly profound. His experience transforming the Army is a powerful story, one from which leaders in all walks of life can learn. Talk a little bit about that, some of the challenges you had as Chief of Staff of the Army.
Well, I was the Vice Chief of Staff. I got promoted to 4-star just before we went to Desert Storm, and which is the first Gulf War. And the job of the Vice Chief is to do everything that the Chief of Staff didn't want to do.
I get
I
it.
really mean that.
I get it.
You know, my phone would ring. The first day when Saddam Hussein attacked down into, he was trying to go deeper, but he was stopped before he did. I was shipping stuff over, ammunition, troops, and so forth and so on. And I was on the Army staff, I was the one that was doing all of that stuff. And the chief was going back and forth to the White House, and then they went over and looked at the plans for the attack and so forth and so on. When I left Fort Riley, in less than 2 years, that I was either going to get fired or I would learn as a 3-star on the Army staff, first among equals. And the other guy was the job that Jim had, because that's the people end of it.
Yeah.
Now, what happened after that, I became the Chief of Staff.
And that was under President,
By that time,
was that Clinton at that point, or was it still Bush?
well, it was Bush, and then we had some time with President Bush, and then Bill Clinton came in.
Yeah.
What happened was the Army, the Congress, every time peace breaks out, Congress wants to get money.
Cut the military.
Cut the military, mainly the Army, because we're the ones with the big payroll.
Yeah.
So we had 1.5 million soldiers. That's active guard and reserve. And my job, because I didn't have, the projection of that money was not enough to pay 1.5 million. By the time I retired from the Army, I had to have it down to 1 million.
Wow. That's a big cut. So I want to jump back to Quincy.
Yeah.
You have some history, a lot of history in Quincy. I know we talked about your parents being baptized at Bethany, but it goes back further than that. And I believe there's a street name for a family member.
That's right.
And it's not named for you.
It's not named for me. No, I don't need a street named after me.
But it's Gordon Terrace.
Gordon Terrace. Now, when I was talking to one of the people who asked me questions, I said Quincy was idyllic to me because my mother, because of what happened, she had to work, and so I was kind of on my own with my sister, who was 4 years younger than me, and she went to Woodward. I was free, and my grandfather, who worked at Tubular Rivet and Stud down at, I don't know whether it's still around or not.
It's condominiums today.
Is it?
Yeah.
He'd take us to Boston, to the Paul Revere House, and this and that, and he'd take us interesting places, and then I'd go to the Kincaid Park baseball diamond
Sure.
and watch the games with him, and because his father was worked at the quarries and became a polisher, a stone polisher, and I've got some of the things that you have to make to pass muster.
Sure. That was a big industry in the city at one time.
Sure was.
Yes.
It brought
There were a lot of those places around way back.
Yeah.
Willard Street was loaded with them. Center Street was loaded with them.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, he'd take me up there, took me to the first railroad, but I had buddies, and we could, in the winter would slide up at Furnace Brook Golf Course.
Sure.
I mean, that kind of stuff. And then when I got into college and could do it, would go to the Hollow. Do you remember?
Sure. On Adams Street.
On Adams Street.
Sure. Yeah.
And my mother lived at Ulrich Road for a while. She sold the house on Hilda Street. Quincy was sort of wide open, and
For being so close to Boston, we were still pretty suburban back then.
yes, we were.
Yeah.
And I noticed that,
Did you ever sing at the piano bar at the Hollow?
yes. Yes.
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, I'd come down from Norwich every once in a while. Somebody said, let's get down and see what's happening. So
Yeah.
they didn't know Quincy from anybody.
Sure.
So we came down, and my mother, she might not be in it. We went in one day, and the icebox was loaded with stuff. We hadn't eaten, so she called me up 2 days later. She said, hey, how many guys did you bring here? I said, well, we had 4 of us in the car. She said,
Cleaned her out. Nice,
Right.
nice guy. So the Gordon name is your mother's side?
my mother is the Gordon.
Okay.
My father is the Sullivan.
Gotcha.
And the Sullivans came out of Lubec, Maine, way up. It's the easternmost part of the United States.
Okay.
And you can see where Roosevelt stayed up there. And
Yeah.
they lived on Granite Street, right across, well, I know it's not there. It's across from where the Salvation Army was.
Okay.
Then they moved to Braintree, or at least his mother, the Sullivans.
Okay.
They went there. There were 3 boys. And speaking of that kind of stuff, I worked for the city of Quincy 2 summers.
Ah.
the first summer, I was on a garbage truck. The worst day to be on a garbage truck in Quincy in those days was Monday,
Interesting.
because people, they're eating seafood, and it's probably was Friday. In most cases, it was Friday,
Sure.
and by Monday,
Oh, with the heat of the summer. Oh,
by
boy.
Monday, and I'd have to sit in the back of the bus.
It's a rite of passage working for the city growing up in Quincy.
Yeah, so the next summer, I was, there were a lot of places where there were no curbs on the sidewalk. I was there with a shovel and so forth and so on with guys, Italian guys.
Sit in the curb.
I learned how to do stuff, and and I learned that couple of things. When you're working with adults, you're working with adults, and you have to know what you're doing.
Sure.
But they are willing to teach you,
Yeah.
and they did. And I found then, on those 2 summers, followed by tendon bar, working at Grossman's. I worked at Grossman's unloading lumber. The freight comes up from down south. And I had worked after I graduated, I had a debt to pay off.
Yeah.
It wasn't much, it was about, my mother told me when I started my senior year, she said, look, I'm tapped out, I can't help you anymore, you're gonna have to figure it out yourself. So, one of my buddies signed with the Red Sox, and he pretty big bonus, $35,000.
Wow.
And I went down to the bank and asked him, could I get a loan? And he said, look, I'd give you a loan, but you're gonna have to have somebody sign it, co-sign it. So I went back up onto the, it's called the hill where we lived. I asked him if he'd co-sign, and he said, sure, I will. He said, no big deal. $750, and he's got $35,000. I mean, that's, so, anyway, I paid it off before I went in the Army.
You must be the highest ranking graduate
I
from
am.
Norwich.
I am.
That's remarkable.
How did you know that?
I'm just a wild guess. Chairman of the chief of the staff of the Army, that's,
Yeah, well,
not too many attain that.
No, they never had one. They had two 4-stars, me and I.D. White, who commanded, he's a New Hampshire guy, now dead, but he was quite a hero in World War II.
Now, obviously, you know Jim McConville, and you know Joe Dunford.
Yes.
Did you meet them along the way when you were when they were in?
Yes, very, very, yeah. I met Joe before I met Jim. Joe was the aide de camp to the Commandant of the Marine Corps.
Okay.
And the Commandant of the Marine Corps at the time was a guy named Carl Mundy. And he was a real buddy of mine. I know that's counterintuitive, but I like those guys. I like the chiefs I worked with because they were straight shooters, all except for one. He was a little eccentric.
Yeah.
So
Did you meet him by chance, Joe, or did you knew he was there and knew he was from Quincy?
No, well, one of my aide had done something with him.
Okay.
I don't know, they knew each other, so he introduced me to him. And he
Okay.
said, "Oh, you're from Quincy." Boop, boop, boop. So, yeah, I've known him for a long time.
He's quite a guy.
He is quite a guy. And of course, he's a good chairman. And,
Now, McConville, I think your families go back a little ways.
yeah, well, I'm surprised he hasn't shown you the picture.
I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it.
Well, he'll show it to you sometime. For those who might see this, there were 3 kids, about 5 or something like that. It was, I can't remember what I looked like when I was 5, but I knew him. And he asked me to come to the promotion when they were going to promote him to 1-star.
This is Jim McConville.
Yeah, Jim. And so I go, and well, he said, "Hey, General Sullivan," you know, he introduced me and so forth, and I met his parents and so forth, and a whole gang of people from Quincy. So anyway, everything went along fine. And then he said, he puts this picture up on the wall. Or it was a theater, so they put it up there. And there's 3 little kids. One's wearing a helmet or something like that. And one's wearing a wax cap. That's me. And because Jim's
Explain what that is. People don't know what that means. The whack.
Women's Army Corps. And she was about to ship out. His great aunt was, I think, driving a truck in the Pacific or something.
Oh.
So it was a contest in the house that he lived in over at Fort McNair. He said, "Anybody who can tell me who one of these people lived in this house and became the chief of staff of the Army. Who is it?" And he said, "There's a bottle of Irish whiskey over there, and if you get it right, I'll give you that."
That's great stuff.
You know, if you're not having fun, you got to look inward.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
Life is short.
And the first time I saw it, I said, "Holy cow, what the, how the hell did he get?" Well, obviously he got it. It was his great aunt.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sure he got a big kick out of showing that to folks.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he had it when he came here.
Probably does. I haven't seen it, but I've heard about it.
Oh, yeah.
Let me ask you, switching gears, General. Do you have a general that was a hero to you, whether it was a World War II general, historically? Is there someone that stood out to you as a mentor or someone that you admired?
Julius Beckton, he went into the Army when it was segregated. He fought in Korea, and it was mixed. They had a regiment, and there was one battalion that had all blacks. The others were white. Then he commanded a brigade in the Army in Vietnam. And then he became a 3-star, the first 3-star.
Wow.
And he's the one who selected me to be the ops officer in 7th Corps, where I replaced a 1-star. And I didn't have any star. I was a lieutenant colonel. I hadn't even been selected for colonel yet.
Yeah.
Splendid guy. The next one is my battalion commander. This is before that, Lieutenant Colonel. And I already been in Vietnam and had that behind me. Him and I, myself and him, we're the only two people that had seen action. The others hadn't been because most of them were younger. So he called me in to counsel me, and he said, "Okay, let me help you out here. You volunteered in Korea to go to Vietnam. You sure than hell didn't write anything other than letters home if you did that in Korea. And I know you didn't do it out of Vietnam. Your writing shows it because you haven't done any writing."
And this guy's name is?
Sid Hack.
Okay.
And he too was a minority. I mean, it's a Jewish guy in the Army in World War II. It was,
Yeah,
we have prejudices here.
sure.
Anyway,
Unfortunately, but yes, that's part of the history.
He said, "Look, I'm going to tell you something. You need to take a course in writing." And he said, "You may not know, you may not believe what I'm going to tell you, but you can go the distance in this man's army. But you have to do it.
Yeah.
You have to decide that that's what you want.
Yeah.
Without stepping all over people to do it. You do the jobs you're given, and don't worry about the jobs that you might want that you may never get, because if you don't do the job you're given, you are never going to go anywhere."
Both of those guys saw something in you.
Yes, they did. And then Carl Bono, the guy who, as long as we can get rid of this, virus, he'll drive them up.
So if things are better for the dedication, they'll be up for it.
But yes, I had mentors.
I think we can all, I know I can look back in school. I didn't serve in the military, but look back in school, and there was always a teacher along the way, or a coach or someone that pushed you or gave you some words of encouragement. And I think we've all experienced that
Right.
in life. And it's incumbent upon us to do that for others,
It is.
Yeah.
And I had, oh yeah.
So, General, I remember hearing you I was much younger. You were a little younger too, I guess.
Right.
But you spoke at one of the Veterans Day events here in Quincy quite a few years ago. And I remember how proud people were that there's a Quincy guy made it to the top. What is it about Quincy? When you look back, you see Joe Dunford, you see Jimmy McConville, Gordon Sullivan, Charlie Sweeney, Ronald Rand, Frank McGinn. I could go on. The list is something about the water in the city that is pretty amazing, as far as one is people responding to the call.
Right.
We're higher per capita than many communities. But then the number of guys that have gone through and risen to the top in military leadership. What is it? What is that common denominator?
I think it's because the Adams Group family was here, and he spent a lot of time here. And then we had John Hancock and Dorothy Quincy. I mean, it's a part of it. The history of the revolution is everywhere.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, you have another Norwich guy. His insurance outfits.
Tony Ignetti.
Yeah.
He didn't go in the military, though.
No, he didn't. He sent the other guys. He paid their way to go to Norwich, and they went.
He comes from a good family.
He's a good guy.
He is a good guy. So how does it feel that Gordon Sullivan will be forever remembered in a bronze statue in the General's Park by the General's Bridge?
I cannot even describe it to you. I mean, and by the way, and then down around on the,
All the description of your contributions.
you got it.
It's going to be remarkable. And I remember talking a little bit to General Dunford, who's very humble like yourself, and said he hoped that the story of the park could be an example and perhaps an inspiration to the next generation about public service. He said it doesn't have to be the military. It could become a great teacher or a fireman or a policeman. And I think that's pretty remarkable. You're the modern day patriots. You talked about Adams and Hancock and Quincy Adams and you and Dunford and McConnell, the modern day patriots, carrying on the tradition.
Well, you know, when they look at the three of us, there's a lot of service there.
Certainly is.
Look, Quincy is my home. Was my home. Now it's the Cape. I'm proud of Massachusetts. And we were the first ones with a militia. And we were the rabble rousers.
That's very true.
Typical.
Very true. Quite a tradition. Now, sometimes we take it for granted for where we live, but the history around us. And we're in this gorgeous library here, the Richardson Building, that Charles Francis Adams encouraged it to be built at the time, and it's just a remarkable city. So, General, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us to talk a little bit about your story. We're looking forward to the event in the spring,
Right.
where we can formally dedicate the bridge, the park, and hear your words of wisdom on that day as well. Any final words for folks watching?
Well, I'm proud of Quincy and the fact that it was the home of presidents. It was the stones from here, the granite from here that did the Bunker Hill Monument. And there's all kinds of buildings that have Quincy granite until it ran out. And Quincy has a lot of very successful people in business, banking, whatever.
Yeah.
And we have three generals, 3 4-star generals. And according to the Department of Defense, there, other than Washington, D.C. or something like that, here.
Not too many communities can compare to that.
No, they can't.
Yeah.
No, the DOD says they don't think there is any.
Wow.
Maybe you can get a stamp.
We'll work on that. Thank you, General.
Somebody will say, those 3 guys?